What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Jam Now Experience. This is going to be Season 2. Season 1 was an epic dropping of the ball, to say the least. I put out maybe like 2 or 3 episodes and then just totally went dark. So, Season 2, going to make this more consistent, put out 1 episode every Friday at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, literally making that up on the spot as I go. But let's get the ball rolling again, you know? I think that these are really fun. The entire intention of creating a podcast was to basically just share a little bit more of, I guess, my personality, who I am, the friends that I hang out with, people that I know, people that I meet, and you just kind of are able to get a little bit more of a behind-the-scenes look into who I am and, yeah, just the people that I hang out with and stuff. And with that, the guest on the show today is none other than one of my jiu-jitsu coaches. His name is Conor Waffle, and he is a super intelligent, philosophical, stoic, benevolent, generous, kind, wonderful teacher. He's probably like shaking his head right now, blushing. No, just kidding. But he's an awesome teacher and coach, and I'm really grateful for him. They say when the student is ready, the teacher will come. And I started training jiu-jitsu about 2 years ago, and Conor was his jiu-jitsu class was the first one that I went to at Gracie, Arizona, at 6 o'clock in the morning. Went down there, got choked out for the first time. It was awesome. Not put to sleep, but just experienced it, you know, rolling and stuff like that for the first time at Gracie, Arizona. And it was awesome. I was totally hooked, fell in love with it, got into jiu-jitsu for the self-defense aspect. And then I wrestled in high school. I never thought that I would ever apply any of those skills that I learned in wrestling to anything in life ever again. I thought that, my wrestling career was over. I'm like, I'm never going to do it. I'm never going to use any of those skills. And then I kind of stumbled upon jiu-jitsu and totally fell in love with it. And it has been the single most cathartic, positive reinforcement into my life, especially after the pandemic. Coming out of the pandemic, everything was just so different. I was just getting back into the routine of playing music again out in public, and jiu-jitsu was just a really healthy new discipline that came into my life, and I'm so grateful for. And got into it for self-defense, fell in love with it, and the sport aspect of it is awesome too. I compete every now and then in tournaments and stuff, and but anyways, I'll stop blabbering. So this podcast is brought to you by Sure Design Clothing. Feel free to use promo code JAM at checkout for 10% off. And I'm really looking forward to getting back into the consistency of posting podcasts again. Totally dropped the ball with putting out new episodes, but Season 2 is back. Looking forward to putting these out as often as possible. And I really hope that you gain a nugget of inspiration and wisdom and joy from listening to this podcast today, because those are all the wonderful qualities that I get from jiu-jitsu. And this is only about an 18-minute conversation that I had with Conor, because the SD card that I was using to record our conversation cut off the convo halfway through. So it's only about 18 minutes, but I still wanted to share it with all of you guys. It was right after our 6 a.m. class. So here it is. Enjoy the convo with Professor Conor Waffle. Professor Waffle.
Oh, geez. It's just Conor Waffle. You don't got to call me
All
Professor, but I appreciate it.
All right. We'll hit the reset button from here. So Conor Waffle, thank you very much for being so generous with your time, jumping on the Jam Now Experience.
Well, thank you, Jam. I appreciate you having me on here. And ultimately, my goal is to just not sound like an idiot. So we'll see if I can accomplish that.
Well, it's going to be hard for me to not sound like an idiot.
Oh,
so
that's crazy talk.
But yeah, just talk like straight in.
Talk straight in. Oh, there we go. See,
there you go. You sound beautiful.
Acting like an idiot, maybe not sounding like an idiot.
No, you're good. So for everybody out there that doesn't know, Conor is a Gracie Jiu Jitsu black belt under Relson Gracie. And he's one of my coaches and dear friends, and he's been an excellent teacher along the path in life, and just grateful to
Man, I'm blushing.
just grateful to have you on the show today, because you're just a wealth of information, and we always have
Man. Wow.
some really awesome conversations early in the morning.
Agreed. I appreciate
Yeah.
it's like 7:25 right now. We got done training for the last hour or so, which has been great. Jam, you're always fun to have in the AM classes for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying those kind words. You know, what's funny, I've often said that, like, I'm a student of quotes and teachers. It'd be hard to be a student without a teacher, I suppose, but like anything that I ever tell anybody has probably been told to me.
Sure.
So I always try to remember the great things that I experience in life, because one of my favorite sentiments, which once again was told to me, is that your happiest moments in life are shared with others.
So true.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And so jiu-jitsu is a great communal experience in that way. And I feel like you're doing the community a disservice. Like, this is a mantra I have, that if you're not sharing your positive experiences with them as well. Like, you probably have heard me say sometimes, like, hey, you should data mine people for, like, their techniques. But I also think
Data mine.
Yeah, data mine, right?
Okay.
In this 2022 talk. Yeah.
Interesting.
But it's like, you know, if someone's got a really great single leg, I don't care if they're like a white belt or a 15-year-old kid or someone that's, you know, 75 years old and is a ancient master.
Right.
Like, they got a good single leg. I want to learn how they do that. But I think the same way about experiences. So I love hearing about people's positivity, what they've experienced, and I try to spill that into others as well, because you know, life's too short to be miserable all the time, right? Like, that's kind of the reality of it for me.
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, I'll never forget my first jiu-jitsu class with you. It was like the 6 a.m. class on a Tuesday. Came in and saw my buddy Tanner Sloniger, who I wrestled with in high school, was in
That's
here.
so I always forget you guys wrestled together in high school.
Yeah. And it was so funny, because this morning we were talking about this one move that we learned in wrestling, where, like, when somebody has you on your back, or it's almost like when they set you up for starting the match, like, you basically just, like, tuck your arms in, and then you just kind of like go forward a little bit, and then you do a Granby roll out of that to get him off your back. And we were talking about that this morning, and then I hit it, and I was like, oh, cool, because I've been really working on that.
How wild is that thing that can happen of, like, thought and then manifesting it into the physical world?
Yeah.
And jiu-jitsu, I think, is a great connector, or all martial arts, you could say. Jiu-jitsu for me is kind of the one I love, but that's a good example of it, or I should say grappling, because we're talking about wrestling here even, is that it's like, yeah, it's so weird, that satisfaction when you hit a technique.
Right.
Because you have it in your mind.
Yeah.
And maybe it's something someone even shared with you that you had forgotten, or they had just shown you it, and you do it. It's like you won't ever stop doing it after you've manifested it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's so many techniques that as soon as I've done them, I was like, oh, my gosh. I could just do that, and you try to replicate it, right, over and over.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It was funny, because I tried that with Dan earlier this week, and he just stuffed it right away.
Dan just knew what was coming.
And then he was like,
one of our black belts. He's a savage.
Yeah, and then he was like, you have to keep your arms tucked in whenever you do it, because I was like walking on the mat with my arms out.
He filled that space.
He filled that space, but he was like, if you keep your elbows in, like kind of like a T-Rex almost, and then you're able to walk forward and then do a Granby roll, it'd probably be more effective, and it has been so far. So
that's awesome.
It's like my new favorite thing to get out of when somebody's got my back, you know.
I love that, and you know it's funny.
Turtle.
You know, well, on that note, turtle is such a crazy position, because it looks so passive, but you can do so much from there.
Right.
Greg Holmes, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioners I've had the privilege of training with.
Oh yeah.
Repeatedly for years. I love that guy. He's like the turtle master. That guy, like, you just can't take his back.
He's the turtle master.
He is. He's the master Roshi of jiu-jitsu. But that being said, you said something interesting I wanted to track back on, which was like, it's funny how you're like, oh yeah, opening my arms out, crawling forward. I was like, oh, fill that space. I mean, you were both nodding, knowing what that is. It's funny how everyone thinks, like, physically fighting is one thing, and then once you learn how to do it, it's something completely different.
Right.
Where it's still like math and angles and like science of leverage.
Yeah.
And the idea of, like, once I learned, okay, like, to a layman when they start, they're like, well, it's like a lot of pushing and shoving, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's what they think. Like, a lot of people think that. Then you're like, and you can feel that, and that even if they don't consciously think that, they subconsciously do, because that's how they'll spar with you.
Sure.
And it's just the ignorance of what they don't have yet, right? Like, they don't understand that what they're doing is totally incorrect.
Right.
And they just don't have the knowledge to do the right path, which is so enlightening, by the way, in my opinion, to people's thought processes and how people can evolve and change. Because if you can get better at jiu-jitsu, you can get better at anything, right? But it's funny how we sit here and it's like we can, like, speak in jargon. I'm like, oh, because there's that space.
Yeah.
And it's so weird, because when you realize so much of jiu-jitsu or grappling is about like constricting and taking away space, and then as an offense, and then the defense is like, I need to make space and then like change the angle. I don't know. I think about how funny that is, like over the years of training, how my thought processes have even changed in that, where I'm like, yeah, like that's how I have to view it. So then I approach it like mathematically, logically, or something like that, rather than, and there's still a spirit in it, which is weird too, right? Because there's the ability for you to press and attack, things like that, the ability to move forward and deal with painful attacks on yourself and hard positions and sweat and misery that is training, but shared suffering, right? Communal efforts. So having a shared suffering is like a wonderful experience, because you bond with those people, but then also you learn with them. And I don't know, rambling aside, I think what's fascinating about jiu-jitsu is like how my view of it has certainly changed over time, because you have to do that in order to do it better, right? And I suppose most of life is probably like that, right? Or not? I'm not sure.
No, that's the thing that, like, you know, I've been training, I think, for, I want to say, well, since July of 2021.
Dang.
So what is that, a
like
year and
3
a half?
months or so?
Yeah, a year and 3 months.
Nice, bro.
So
and your game is so much. I heard Rob giving you some good kudos this morning, rightfully. You guys had an awesome role.
Thank you. Yeah, like, I've just been working on slowing down. You know, like, that was definitely something that, like, everybody was like, yo, just slow down. And what really helped with that was, you know, like, just, like, kind of, like, tweaking my back.
Oh, no way. Injuries.
It just it really like is a lesson where it's like, yo, like, you don't have to be going like balls to the walls all the time, you know.
So true.
Like, it's important to like be able to just like stay in a position and wait for an opening, you know.
It is crazy, the ability of patience that you have to cultivate.
Yeah.
Because you think you're being patient, and then someone comes along. Because I was the same way, bro. Like, I would get on top of people and, like, spin into arm bars and stuff and fall off of them.
Right.
And I'd be like, what's going wrong? And Greg, to name drop him again, would always be like, you're just moving too fast. Like, you're trying to get to the next place too soon. I'm like, that was fast?
Yeah.
Like, I thought I was taking time, you know?
Right. So what do you think it takes to be successful, quote unquote, in jiu-jitsu?
Wow, that's a large question. Consistency and dedication, I think, is the first thing. Like anything in life, you just have to be in a repetition of it to have a groove and to figure it out. I mean, you're a musician, so like, I'm sure so for instance, let me liken it to this.
Okay.
Is that I am like, when my wife started learning how to play guitar, I was like, hey, like, show me how to play an E chord, show me how to play this.
Yeah.
And I was immediately shocked at what I had to do with my hands.
Sure.
I was like, this is so painful. Like, how are you doing this? Like, I can barely hit these notes. And then I immediately am like looking at people that are like in jam bands and like just going nuts for like an hour. And I'm like, how are they just and then jazz artists, whatever, like, how are they riffing? Because for me, even the ability to try to make like a sound that isn't horrible or like painful on my hands.
Yeah.
But like, you've probably had a guitar in your hands for so long, so many hours a day.
Sure.
That for you, you're like, oh yeah, this is like what my hand does. Right. You've forgotten the pain of it because it's not considered pain anymore. It's just emotion. And so when a lot of people start jiu-jitsu, this thing happens where they're like, wow, they're immediately met with how hard it is. Right. And they're immediately met with like, well, because it's hard, it must mean I'm not good at this.
Sure.
And if I'm not good at this, is this worth doing?
Right.
And if I don't value this, then maybe I just drop it. And I think that's where the first bust off people get off on.
Yeah.
Right. I think the second bus stop that people get off on because whatever success means, it could mean getting a blue belt, could mean being competent in a street fight, it could mean being my goal is to be a lifelong martial artist, right?
Sure.
I want to teach until I'm old and gray and dead on the mats.
Yeah.
And I really do. Like, I just enjoy it so much. And I think you first have to say, what is my form of success? How do I reach it? But then avoid those pitfalls of early defeat, because that defeat, quote unquote, that you're feeling, it's not defeat. It's the process of getting better.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if you had my experience, which I'm sure you did, picking up a guitar, and immediately were like, well, this is just horrific. Like, that's how I felt.
Course.
I was so shocked, Jam. It was so crazy.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, when I went into jiu-jitsu, I had this enthusiasm. I'm like, yeah, I know this is going to be hard. Like, this is gonna probably be a little torturous. I'm sure you felt that way. Like, I haphazardly was like, hey, Megan, my wonderful wife, show me some notes. And I'm like, I'm dropping this thing. This hurts. Like, you go back to doing it. And she's great on the guitar. I'm not, right? Like, maybe one day.
Yeah.
But, like, and by great, I mean I can play a few notes. But, like.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Like
we got to jam sometime.
Dude, yeah, if you just want me to hit D over and over again and make me go,
let's
I'm
go.
playing D. But, not to be too long-winded, but my thought on it is that I think a lot of people conflate the idea of failure and defeat and what progress and process looks like.
Mm.
And so it's like, no, that's not failure. That's not defeat. Like, what you have to do is become bosom buddies with those things and be like, oh, well, like, what's this teaching me? Like, why am I getting armbarred repeatedly?
Yeah.
Why am I constantly stuck under people? Why am I moving? What does moving too fast mean? Right?
Yeah.
Like, all these things. And I say all these things because there's so many. Like, I'm still 15 years, almost 16 years of training now, pretty consistently.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
Well,
that's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you, though.
No, it is.
Well,
it's
that
true.
Means I'm blushing again.
No,
James
for
may blush
sure.
twice.
I know you probably think I'm like blowing smoke, but
No,
seriously,
I appreciate that.
dude. I mean, like the percentage of people just goes, it gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
You know, the cream rises to the top. You know, but the cool thing. Sorry to interrupt you, but the cool thing that popped up in my mind whenever you were saying that was that jiu-jitsu applies so much to life too.
Oh yeah,
because it's like
it is life. You're doing it while you're alive, right?
Right,
yeah.
and it's like if you keep making certain decisions or mistakes that you're not aware of, you're blissfully unaware of, you're going to continue to experience that in life. So what you learn on the mat also transfers over to the rest of your life. Like my life. Not to say that my life has gotten so much. I mean, it has. It feels like my life has gotten a lot better since I started.
Your perspective of difficulty has changed.
My perspective of difficulty has changed since I started doing jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
I've become more calm. Like one thing that it's so funny. It's like I thought I was calm before I started training, and then I'm like, wow, I didn't realize like how like I just would get so pent up about like, oh, this person cut me off or whatever.
Yeah.
It's almost like it kind of like like it kind of reminds me of like Buddhism or Zen almost.
Yeah, as you know, I'm a pretty big fan of Zen and stuff like that.
Right.
I have a huge library of like Zen and Taoist and philosophy books, and then also a ton of martial arts books.
Yeah.
It's a fun thing to compile books in that fashion. At least for me, maybe that's fun for me, I should say. But what I love about Zen philosophy is, there's this idea that there's a term or a quote more or less. That's in the book, The Gateless Barrier, which is a bunch of Zen koans, which is essentially like parables, more or less, right?
Yeah.
I think food for thought, that can't really be solved. But one of the ones I always loved, where it's like, to be a practitioner of Zen is to walk through the gates of hell while smiling.
To be a practitioner of Zen is to walk through the gates of hell smiling.
Yeah,
while
smiling.
Because
you're aware of your surrounding, but your perspective hasn't changed.
You're aware of your surroundings, but your perspective hasn't changed. Okay.
Yeah, so like you have this... Like, things could be so terrible, but my mind can be untouched. And Zen, I've always jokingly said, and this is a total, like, oversimplification of it.
Okay.
But I've always said Zen is like Eastern Stoicism, and Stoicism's Western Zen. And I love Stoicism a lot, too.
Likewise, yeah.
I see you're a big Stoic fan. I love that. And, what it comes down to, it is mindset, right? Like, and I think you have to steel your mind in martial arts because, like you're saying, this thing that you willingly do that is difficult, and then start to derive joy from it.
Right.
Like that in and of itself is wild.
Yeah.
Right. But then when you are met out in life with difficulties, you have a better attitude around them. And not even that, like something I even say to a lot of people about jiu-jitsu is it gentles your character. Like there's so many times, like I think back to what I was like before I trained.
Character.
Yeah, it does. Because like, dude, I was a surly dude before I trained, and I didn't realize it. Like you were saying, like you're like, oh man, I'm getting so mad on like these traffic jams.
Sure.
I'm like, this person just said the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Right.
And now most of the time in my life, it's like something happens and I just shrug about it. I'm like, well, I'll just figure it out. Like it can't be that complicated. I can't figure it out. But I remember in my younger life, I would, and I'm still young, so I'm excited about the idea of how much more this thought can grow. But just thinking of the distance from there to now, I remember in my younger life, like the most minor of complications would happen, and I would just like sit down on it and be like, oh, what am I going to do? Like life is over, right? And then you start to learn life moves on. Just like if you get tapped for like 5 weeks in a row and you keep coming back to training and then you start tapping people, it's like, oh, life moved on. Like I got better. Like I didn't sit in that quote unquote defeat. Because once again, that's not what it is. Like the ubiquitous we all confuse the idea of, I truly think that of like hard times as being in perpetuity versus being the moment that it is.
Yeah.
And jiu-jitsu, I think, for lack of a better way of saying it, gives you some insight into that. Because, man, when someone's on your back and they're choking you and you're looking at a clock and there's like 2 minutes left and you're like, I really don't want to tap and I need to figure this out and I'm going to try to get out, that's some real character building, right?
Yeah.
Like, it really is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, I'll never forget, I was hiking Payasto Peak, and I bumped into a friend of mine. And
Good hike.
yeah, good hike for sure. And she was just like, enjoy the suffering of the mountain.
Oh, I
of
love
the
that
hike.
stuff. God, I love that mentality.
You know, and
Yeah.
it's so true, because it's like, that's just life in general. Like,
It is.
You know, because you're gonna experience adversity and suffering in life, no matter what. Like, that's the human experience. But if you change your perspective to it, you know, and you learn how to, you understand that, like, you know, the universe is basically forging a sharper blade with you.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it's doing. And it's an interesting thing, just how diamonds are made, you know?
100, right? Like, you don't got diamonds without pressure, right? And I love how you put it into the sense of the universe. I try to think of it like that a lot too. As small as I am, I'm like, but within me is like the crazy amount of the universe of the cells that make up my body and all that madness that I couldn't even begin to start to explain.
Right.
And then pull that all the way out to like zooming outside of our solar system or whatever we're talking about in that sense. It's like the vastness of it all. And I think the only way to sink into that is to be present. And jiu-jitsu's so good at that, right? Like we're talking about, or suffering, and that's the word we use for it. I think we've and I'm saying this like I know what I'm talking about, but I think we've misused the word suffering, right? Like, I think suffering, because, like, you know, the word passion is very akin to that. I think the difference is maybe definitively, I could be wrong here, is that suffering is like something that you can't necessarily avoid, whilst passion is something that you delve into and you'll take suffering for. But if you shift your perspective, then that's kind of like anything, right? Like, you can choose to have passion for anything, so your suffering adjusts.
Sure.
And then you can take on anything. Like, I think Viktor Frankl, student of the quotes I am here, right?
Love
like,
Viktor
I think,
Frankl.
Yeah, dude. And I think he said that, like, anyone can endure anything if they have a purpose to it.
Sure.
And it's the truth, right? So, like, for me, I remember going through jiu-jitsu in the early days for myself, like back in 2007 when I started training. I remember thinking, like, man, if I could just get to, like, a brown belt, that would be insane. Like, just for whatever reason, that was, like, the thought I put out there.
The goal, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, like, as I kept training, and I when I started, I was like, I will never compete. I remember saying those words.
Really?
Like, I just want to coach people.
That's what
never
I
want to
said,
compete.
too.
Yep. And then you
How
compete
funny.
once, and you're like, oh, I want to do this all the time. I'm almost, by next year, I should have 100 tournaments.
That's incredible.
Which is fun. Like, I'm middling at best in tournaments, but I love competing.
Sure.
And I love seeing people compete, because you have to really put it out there and really show up. And Greg, once again, has always said, like, you know, all the training you do in preparation for that has made you a better martial artist, right?
Yeah.
But, like, to take it back to that suffering idea, is to get ready for those things is, like, no small feat. It's difficult. It's mentally daunting, right? You're like, oh, man, like, I got to go freaking, like, try to take somebody out while a bunch of my friends and family, and, like, if they're there or just
Random
my teammates
people are
along.
watching.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's not, I would say, the most, like, normal human experience. Like, or maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't been alive for all of time, but for sure it's daunting, right?
And that consists of the first conversation with Conor Waffle. Thank you so much for listening to episode 1 of season 2 of the Jam Now Experience. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. Once again, the show is brought to you by Shore Design Clothing. If you guys want to pick up some new clothes or sandals or purses or yoga bags or some new threads in general, feel free to go to shoredesignClothing.com and use promo code JAM at checkout to pick up some new threads. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, got some cool insight into what jiu-jitsu's like and stuff like that. And I'm sure that we'll have Conor on the show again sometime in the future to talk about jiu-jitsu and martial arts and a bunch of other stuff. So thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate you being here and sharing the show with all your friends and family. So looking forward to catching you guys on the flip side, and I'll be back next Friday at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for another episode of the Jam Now Experience. Peace and love, everybody. Thank you.